The maid grabbed the wrong bag. The millionaire saw a document that forced him to protect her at all costs. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. Samantha had always felt out of place at the lavish restaurant she worked at. Her second-hand dress and worn-out shoes a stark contrast to the polished elegance of the guests. But she had a job to do. Today, like every other, she made sure the tables were set just right, the napkins folded perfectly, and the wine glasses sparkling. She had her routine, and she followed it religiously, though in the back of her mind, she dreamed of something more, maybe one day opening an art studio of her own. But that day felt far away, too far to touch. As she walked through the bustling dining room, her eyes scanned for her next task when she suddenly saw a man sitting alone at a table near the back. He was impeccably dressed, his dark hair styled neatly, and his phone glued to his hand. He looked like someone important. She froze, her heart racing a little. Could he be the one she was supposed to meet today? She had no time to waste, so she walked over to the table with a forced smile. "Hi, you must be Kevin. I'm Samantha. Nice to meet you," she said, trying to sound confident. The man blinked up at her, momentarily stunned by her sudden presence. Hi, Samantha," he replied, looking confused. She mistook his surprise for shyness and slid into the chair across from him, trying to fill the awkward silence. "I know this is a little weird. Blind dates are always awkward, right?" She laughed nervously. "Jenny told me you might be a little quiet. So don't worry, I'll talk enough for both of us." The man smiled faintly, clearly taken aback. He had planned on correcting her from the start, but there was something about her, something real in her eyes that made him hesitate. "Right, blind dates. There's something else," he said softly. Samantha smiled, relieved that the conversation was flowing, even though she had clearly made a mistake. "Tell me, what do you do?" she asked. "I work in tech," he replied, keeping his answer vague. "Tech? That's cool," Samantha said with a smile. "Like coding and apps and stuff? I'm terrible with computers." He chuckled softly, and for the first time that evening, a sense of ease settled between them. They spoke for a while longer, exchanging stories about work and life, with Samantha sharing her dreams of one day opening a studio. Just as she was about to ask him more about his tech work, her phone buzzed. "Hey Samantha, where are you? I'm at table 7, looking forward to meeting you. Kevin." Her face turned red with embarrassment as she looked up at the man in front of her, who was now looking at her with a mix of confusion and amusement. "You're not Kevin, are you?" she whispered. His guilt flickered in his eyes. "No, I'm not." Samantha stood up quickly, her heart sinking as she grabbed her coat. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I sat at the wrong table. This is so embarrassing." She started to hurry toward the door, her face flushed. "Wait," the man said, standing up too. "It's okay," he called after her. But she was already out the door, the weight of her mistake hanging heavy in the air. Richard Mason stood there, watching her leave, a strange mix of regret and curiosity swirling in his chest. He hadn't meant to let the situation play out like that, but something about Samantha's sincerity made him want to see her again. It was unlike anything he'd felt in years. As he returned to his seat, he couldn't help but think about how different she was from the women he usually interacted with, polished, calculated, and always aware of his wealth. Samantha had no idea who he really was, and that made her feel real to him. He sat in silence, wondering if he'd ever see her again. The next day, Samantha could hardly concentrate at work. The events of last night played over and over in her mind. She had walked out of that restaurant in a rush, embarrassed by her mistake, but she couldn't stop thinking about the man she had met, Richard Mason. There had been something about him, something that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. But he wasn't Kevin. He wasn't the person she had come to meet, and that left her feeling even more embarrassed. She had no idea who he really was, but her mind kept returning to that moment, when their conversation had flowed so easily. It was nothing like the dates her best friend, Jenny, had tried to set her up on. No, this had felt different, real, and the more she thought about it, the more she wanted to apologize. But how could she? What was she supposed to say? Later that afternoon, as she cleared the tables in the quiet corner of the restaurant, she felt a buzz in her pocket. Taking out her phone, she saw a message from an unknown number. "Hi Samantha, it's Richard. I know this may seem strange, but I'd like to see you again. Coffee tomorrow." Her heart skipped a beat. Was this really happening? Richard Mason, the man she had accidentally embarrassed herself in front of, wanted to meet again? Her fingers hesitated above the screen, but she quickly typed a response. "I'd love that. Tomorrow sounds perfect." Her hands shook a little as she set her phone down. What was going on? Why was this happening to her? As the hours passed, Samantha tried to shake off the nerves. Tomorrow would be another day, another opportunity to make things right. The next morning, she arrived at the small coffee shop they had agreed on. Richard was already there, sitting at a corner table, casually dressed in jeans and a sweater. He looked nothing like the polished businessman she had imagined the night before. She walked over to him, a little unsure of herself. "Hi," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Hi Samantha," Richard replied, his smile warm. "I'm glad you came." He motioned for her to sit down. She sat across from him, unsure what to say. "So this is weird, huh?" Samantha said, laughing nervously. Richard chuckled. "Yeah, but I think we got off to an awkward start last night, and I wanted to fix that." "I'm really sorry about that," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to make such a mess of things. I thought you were someone else." Richard smiled, his eyes softening. "It's okay. I thought I was someone else too. But I'm glad it happened." Samantha blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Richard leaned forward slightly. "I was going to tell you last night who I really am, but then I decided to let things play out naturally. I'm Richard Mason. I own Mason Enterprises." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. The name hit her like a punch in the gut. Richard Mason, the billionaire CEO? She had no idea who she had been talking to last night, but now it was all starting to make sense. The warmth in his eyes, the kindness, the way he had listened to her, all of it felt genuine, and now it was all clear. She wasn't sure how to respond. "I didn't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard smiled again. "I didn't expect you to. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted to get to know you, the real you. Not the version of you that everyone assumes you are based on your job or your circumstances." Samantha sat back, her mind reeling. What was he really saying? Why was he being so kind to her? Was this all just a game for him? She didn't know what to believe anymore. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, looking down at her coffee cup. "I'm just a waitress. I have dreams, but I'm stuck in a job that doesn't pay enough to even cover my rent some months." Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I think you're someone who deserves more than just getting by. I'd like to help you. I can offer you a job at my company, something where you can use your talents and build a future. I want to offer you the opportunity to live the life you deserve." Samantha stared at him, speechless. This was unreal. Was this really happening? A job offer from Richard Mason? It was too much, too fast. But there was something in his eyes that made her believe he wasn't just offering it for show. He really meant it. She wanted to say yes, but the words caught in her throat. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why would you do this for me?" Richard's smile softened as he looked at her. "Because you're real. You didn't treat me differently. When you thought I was just a regular guy, you treated me like anyone else, and that's rare. I admire that." Samantha felt a warmth spread through her chest. This man, this stranger, had somehow seen something in her that no one else had. Maybe she wasn't as invisible as she thought. Maybe there was a future for her, after all. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind for Samantha. She had taken Richard up on his offer, though her nerves were on edge every day as she navigated her new position at Mason Enterprises. The transition from waitress to working in a corporate environment was both exhilarating and overwhelming. She spent her days in meetings, learning about the company, and working on projects she had never imagined herself being a part of. But every night, as she lay in bed, her thoughts wandered back to Richard, the man who had offered her a chance when no one else had even noticed her. His kindness had left a mark on her, something deeper than just a business offer. She had started to trust him, but she wasn't sure why. It wasn't just because he had given her a job. It was the way he saw her, the way he believed in her potential when she didn't. Samantha knew she couldn't just ignore the fact that he had changed her life. Richard, on the other hand, seemed to be keeping a distance, focusing on the company, on business. Every time they met, it was strictly professional, but there was an unspoken connection between them. The way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the way he made sure she was comfortable, made her wonder if there was something more. But she pushed those thoughts aside. Richard was her boss, and she couldn't afford to complicate things. She had a job to do, and she wasn't about to ruin it by getting too attached to him. Yet, despite her efforts to keep things professional, she couldn't ignore the way he made her feel valued, important. One late afternoon, as the office began to empty, Richard called her into his office. She walked in, nervous, but determined to keep her composure. "Samantha, how's everything going?" he asked, his voice calm. But there was a glint of something in his eyes that made her heart race. "It's going well," she replied, sitting down across from him. "I'm still learning the ropes, but I'm getting there." Richard nodded, his gaze steady. "You've been doing great. I wanted to talk to you about something." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. Was she in trouble? "What's going on?" she asked, trying to hide the nerves in her voice. Richard leaned back in his chair, looking at her with that soft, serious expression she had come to recognize. "I want to offer you a promotion," he said, his words hitting her like a wave. Samantha blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. "A promotion?" she repeated, still in shock. Richard smiled, though it was brief. "Yes, you've been doing exceptional work, and I think you have the potential to take on more responsibilities. I want you to be part of something bigger. What do you think?" Samantha couldn't believe what she was hearing. A promotion? At Mason Enterprises? It felt like a dream, but she wasn't about to let herself get too carried away. I don't know what to say," she said, her mind racing. "This is all so new to me." Richard leaned forward slightly. "I'm not saying this to pressure you, but I think you deserve it. You've been a great addition to the team." Samantha sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had worked so hard to get here, never imagining that this would be her reality. She had a future now, a chance to build something for herself. "I'm honored," she said finally, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside. "Thank you, Richard. I won't let you down." Richard smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I know you won't," he said. "I've seen what you're capable of. Let's make sure this works out for both of us." Samantha nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. This was more than just a job. It was a new beginning. And as she left his office, she couldn't help but think about the man behind the offer. Richard Mason wasn't just her boss. He was someone who had seen her, really seen her, when she had spent her life feeling invisible. That meant more to her than she could ever put into words. As the weeks passed, Samantha began to settle into her new role at Mason Enterprises. The initial anxiety of being thrust into such a prestigious company slowly faded, replaced by a growing sense of pride. She found herself becoming more confident, handling projects she never thought possible. Richard's belief in her, the constant encouragement he offered, pushed her to strive for more. Still, there were moments when she caught herself thinking about him in a way that made her uncomfortable. She had promised herself that she wouldn't let her feelings get in the way of her career. But as time went on, she found it harder to ignore the connection between them. Richard was kind, always patient with her, and respectful in every interaction. But there were times when his eyes lingered on her, his gaze soft and thoughtful. She couldn't help but wonder if he felt something more, or if it was just the power dynamic at play. Despite the growing tension between them, their professional relationship remained intact. Then one evening, as Samantha was leaving the office late, she was surprised to see Richard waiting for her by the door. His suit jacket was thrown over his arm, and he looked every bit the powerful CO she had come to know. "You're still here?" she asked, taken aback. "I could ask you the same thing," he replied, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "I wanted to talk to you about something." "Sure," Samantha said, feeling her heart race a little. Was this it? Was he finally going to say something about the unspoken tension between them? She followed him to the elevator, her mind racing. Once inside, he pressed the button for the ground floor and turned to face her. "I've been thinking," Richard began, his voice serious. "You've done an incredible job here, Samantha. I'm not just talking about the projects you've completed. You've made an impact on the team. On me." Samantha felt a flutter in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means a lot." The elevator doors slid open, and they both stepped out into the lobby. Richard turned to her as they walked toward the exit. "I want you to know that I trust you. I've been considering promoting you again, but I need you to understand something. It's not just about your work. It's about your character. And I've seen what kind of person you are. Samantha paused in her tracks, her breath catching. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Richard smiled softly. You're the kind of person who sees the value in others, who doesn't judge based on appearances. That's rare in this world, and I admire that. You don't just see a job. You see potential. And that's why I want you to help me with something big. Samantha's mind was spinning. What was he asking her? Was this another opportunity? Or was there something more? I'm all in, she said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty bubbling inside her. Richard's eyes softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. I knew you would be. Let's take this to the next level. As they stepped outside into the cool evening air, Samantha felt a rush of excitement. This was it. This was her chance. She didn't know what Richard had in mind, but she was ready. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Richard had given her more than just a job. He had given her a chance to prove herself, and she was determined not to let him down. But as she looked at him, standing there next to her, she realized that there was more at play here than just business. Something had changed between them, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Was this just about work? Or was it something deeper? As they drove to the next phase of their journey, Samantha couldn't help but wonder what the future held for both of them. The next few weeks brought a new energy into Samantha's life. Richard's offer to take their work relationship to the next level was more than just a career opportunity. It was a chance for her to prove herself in a way she had never imagined. She worked late nights and weekends, throwing herself into every project, determined to exceed his expectations. She could see how much he believed in her, and it pushed her to give everything she had. Yet, despite all the success she was experiencing professionally, there was still that unspoken tension between them. They were both focused on the work, but every now and then, their eyes would meet for a moment longer than necessary, and the air would shift. Samantha could feel herself becoming more and more drawn to him. She had always believed that love and work were separate, but with Richard, the lines blurred. He was kind, considerate, and always there when she needed guidance. And yet, he never crossed a line, always keeping their relationship professional. But something in the way he spoke to her, in the way he supported her, made her wonder if there was more. One evening, as Samantha was finishing up her latest report in the office, Richard walked in. She looked up from her screen, her heart racing slightly at the sight of him. He was standing in the doorway, looking at her with that familiar warm smile. You're still here? He asked softly, his voice a mix of surprise and admiration. Just finishing up some things, Samantha replied, trying to hide the nervousness creeping into her voice. Richard walked in and sat down beside her desk. I've been thinking about the direction we're heading with the company, and I want you to be a part of it. There's a project coming up, and I think you'd be perfect for it. Samantha blinked in surprise. What kind of project? She asked. We're looking at expanding our business into new markets, and I need someone who's willing to take a risk and think outside the box. You've shown me that you're capable of that, he said. She felt a rush of excitement. This was exactly the kind of opportunity she had been hoping for. I'd be honored, she said, her voice steady but filled with enthusiasm. Richard smiled, his eyes warm. I knew you'd say that. There was a moment of silence, and then he added, Samantha, I want to tell you something. She looked up, confused by the sudden shift in his tone. What's going on? She asked. Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. I think you've noticed the way things have been between us. We've worked closely together, and I've seen how much you've grown. I admire you, Samantha, more than just as a colleague. Her heart skipped a beat. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? She didn't know how to respond. Richard, she started, but her words faltered. He gave her a reassuring smile. I'm not asking you to say anything. I just wanted to be honest with you. I'm grateful for everything you've done, and I want to make sure you know how much I value you, both professionally and personally. Samantha's thoughts were racing. She had known there was something more between them, but hearing it from him was completely different. She wasn't sure what to say. It felt like everything had changed, but she wasn't ready to make any decisions. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Richard reached over and gently took her hand. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know how I feel. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw something more than just her boss. There was something deeper there, something that made her heart beat faster. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. Richard nodded, his grip on her hand lingering for a moment longer before he let go. "You're welcome. I just want you to be happy, Samantha. That's what matters most." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Samantha felt like she was walking in a dream, torn between the professional life she had worked so hard to build and the new, unexpected feelings that had started to surface. As she left the office that night, she couldn't help but wonder where this journey would take her. She had come so far already, but with Richard's words echoing in her mind, she realized that this was just the beginning of something new, something she couldn't quite define yet. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was ready for whatever came next. The following weeks passed in a blur for Samantha. As the new project started to take shape, her days were filled with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and late nights at the office. The pressure was mounting, but with each passing day, she found herself growing more comfortable in her new role. Richard had kept his promise. He had entrusted her with more responsibility, and she was determined to prove herself. But amidst all the work, there was still that underlying tension between them. Their professional relationship was strong, but there were moments when their eyes met in the hallway, and for just a brief second, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't just the work anymore. There was something else, something she couldn't ignore. One evening, as Samantha worked late into the night, she heard a soft knock on her office door. She looked up to see Richard standing there, his usual confident posture softened by something she couldn't quite place. "You still here?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. Samantha smiled, trying to keep the mood light. "Yeah, just wrapping up a few things. What about you?" "I was hoping we could talk," he said, stepping into the room. "About the project?" she asked, though she had a feeling this conversation was going to be about more than just work. "Yes, but also about something else," Richard replied, his gaze not leaving hers. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately, Samantha. About how much you've grown and how much you've brought to the company. You've become more than just a colleague to me." Her heart raced at his words. Was this the moment? Was he finally going to say what she had been waiting to hear? Richard continued, his voice steady but his eyes soft. "I've tried to keep things professional, but I can't ignore how I feel anymore. You've become very important to me, not just as a business partner, but as someone I genuinely care about." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say. Her mind was racing. She had spent so much time building her career, trying to stay focused, but now Richard was opening up to her in a way that made her question everything. "Richard," she said softly, trying to find her words, "I care about you too, but I'm scared. We've built something great here at work, and I don't want to risk that. What if this changes everything?" Richard took a step closer to her, his expression serious. "I understand your concerns, Samantha. I've thought about that too. But what I'm offering you isn't just about work. It's about something real, something that could be even more meaningful. We've already crossed a line, haven't we? We've shared moments that go beyond just the office." She felt a flutter in her chest at his words. It was true. They had shared so much more than just professional experiences. The connection between them was undeniable. "I just don't know what this means for us," Samantha said, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard's gaze softened, and for the first time, he seemed vulnerable. "Neither do I. But I know that I don't want to go through this without giving it a chance. I don't want to lose what we have, whether it's in business or in something more." Samantha stood there for a moment, her heart racing as she considered his words. Could she take this leap? Could she risk her career, her future, for something that was so uncertain, yet so compelling? Finally, she looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Let's see where this goes. Together." Richard's eyes brightened, and for the first time in weeks, a weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I promise, Samantha, I'll make sure this is worth it." As they stood there, both uncertain and excited about what the future held, Samantha couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. This was the beginning of something new, something unexpected, but something she was ready to explore. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next. As days turned into weeks, Samantha felt herself growing more comfortable in her new role, but the bond between her and Richard was becoming undeniable. Their relationship, once strictly professional, had shifted into something more. They had shared personal moments, small exchanges that no one else witnessed, and each time it felt like the space between them was shrinking. She would catch him looking at her, a certain softness in his eyes, and she would find herself looking back, heart racing just a little faster. Yet, there were times when Richard seemed distant, as if pulling away. Samantha couldn't understand it. Had he changed his mind? Was he regretting what they had started? Every time she tried to address it, he would brush it off with a smile, always focusing on their work. But the uncertainty lingered, and it was beginning to weigh on her. One late evening, as the office emptied out, Samantha was preparing to leave when she noticed Richard standing near her desk, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but laced with something that felt different. Samantha's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "I've been thinking," Richard started, his gaze fixed on her, but there was something in his eyes that made her feel like he wasn't really seeing her. "About what?" Samantha asked, her throat tightening. He hesitated for a moment, then exhaled, sharply, rubbing his hand over his face. "About us," he said quietly. "About what's been happening between us." Samantha froze. "What do you mean?" she asked, her mind racing. Was this the moment? Was he about to tell her it had all been a mistake? Richard turned away, pacing slightly before facing her again. "I care about you, Samantha. You know that. But I've realized that I'm not sure how to balance this, whatever this is, with everything else going on in my life. Work, responsibilities, the company. I've let it get in the way." Samantha felt her heart sink. She had known it. She had known something had been off lately. Richard had been pulling back, and now it all made sense. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay composed. "Are you saying you want to end it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard looked at her, his expression torn. "No, I'm not saying that. I'm struggling to figure out where this goes. I don't want to hurt you, and I don't want to hurt what we've started, but I need time to think." Samantha nodded, though her heart ached. "I understand," she said, though the words felt hollow. She had been so sure, so hopeful. But now doubt was creeping in. Richard walked over to her, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, Samantha. I didn't mean to push you away, but I need to get some things sorted out. Can you give me that time?" She met his gaze, trying to find the right words, but all she could feel was the emptiness inside her. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I don't know what to do with this anymore." Richard reached out, his hand brushing against hers, his touch gentle, almost apologetic. "I'll figure this out, I promise. Just give me a little space. I don't want to lose what we have." Samantha's chest tightened. She had no choice but to agree, though every part of her wanted to hold on tighter. She had come this far, and now, it seemed like they were at a crossroads. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady despite the ache in her heart. "I'll give you the space you need." With that, Richard turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the office, the weight of his words sinking in. As she walked out of the building, the cold night air hit her, but it felt like a distant thing compared to the coldness she felt in her heart. Samantha didn't know where they were headed, or if they were even headed anywhere at all. But as she walked through the city, the lights flickering in the distance, she realized that she had a choice to make. She could wait for Richard to come back, to figure things out, or she could move forward on her own. Either way, her journey was just beginning. The days following Richard's request for space were some of the hardest for Samantha. She kept herself busy with work, pouring herself into projects, staying late at the office, and even picking up extra tasks that weren't hers. She told herself that focusing on the company would help her avoid thinking about Richard, but the truth was, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She missed him in ways she hadn't expected. His absence left an emptiness in her life that she hadn't noticed before, and she found herself longing for the connection they had shared. Yet, despite the yearning, she respected his wishes for space. She knew that if she didn't, she might risk pushing him further away. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat, but it was never him. Days turned into a week, and then two, without any word from Richard. Samantha was beginning to wonder if this was how things were meant to end. She had been patient, but now she wasn't sure how much longer she could wait. One Friday afternoon, as the weekend approached, Samantha was in the middle of a meeting when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, her heart leaping in her chest when she saw Richard's name on the screen. She excused herself from the meeting, her mind racing. "Samantha," Richard's voice came through the phone, warm but a little hesitant. "Can we talk?" "Of course," she replied, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions. "When? Now? Can you meet me at the park? I've got something I need to say. Samantha's heart pounded as she agreed to meet him. The park was just a few blocks away from her apartment, a quiet spot that she had visited before, though she never imagined she would meet Richard there. As she walked through the park, the familiar sights of the trees and paths did little to calm her nerves. Was this it? Was he finally ready to talk? She found him sitting on one of the benches, his posture a little rigid, but his eyes soft when he saw her approaching. Samantha stopped in front of him, her breath catching. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi," Richard replied, standing up to meet her. There was a long pause as they both stood there, unsure of where to begin. Finally, Richard spoke. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realize that I've been avoiding the one thing I can't deny, how I feel about you." Samantha's heart skipped again, but she didn't say anything. She just waited for him to continue. "I wanted to give you space because I thought I needed it, but I realized I was just scared. Scared of messing things up, scared of losing everything we've built, both professionally and personally. But I don't want to lose you." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I've been a fool, Samantha. I let my fear get in the way of what really matters. I care about you more than I've let on, and I don't want to lose the chance to explore what this could be." Samantha felt a lump form in her throat. All the doubt, all the uncertainty she had been feeling seemed to vanish with those words. She had been scared too, scared of what would happen if they gave into what was between them. But now, hearing Richard admit it, she realized that maybe she wasn't alone in those feelings. "Richard," she began, her voice trembling, "I felt the same way. I didn't know how to handle it, and I was scared of what it could mean for us, both here and outside of work. But I don't want to let fear hold us back anymore." Richard stepped closer to her, his gaze soft. "Then let's not. Let's stop overthinking everything and just see where this goes. Together." Samantha nodded, her heart finally settling. "I'd like that," she said quietly. And with that, Richard smiled, his hand reaching for hers. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real. It was the beginning of something new, and for the first time in weeks, Samantha felt like everything was falling into place. As they stood there, hand in hand, she realized that whatever happened next, they would face it together. In the weeks that followed, everything between Samantha and Richard began to settle into something comfortable, something real. They had agreed to take things slow, but their connection grew stronger each day. Samantha found herself waking up excited for work, not just because of the projects she was involved in, but because of the time she spent with Richard. They worked side by side, collaborating on ideas, brainstorming strategies, and even sharing small moments of laughter that made her heart feel lighter. Richard, too, seemed more at ease, his usual intensity softened by the warmth that had blossomed between them. It wasn't just business anymore, it was something deeper. They had crossed a line, yes, but in doing so, they had found a place where they both belonged. Still, despite their growing closeness, there were moments when Samantha felt a pang of uncertainty. She knew that their relationship, even though it was blossoming, wasn't without its challenges. They had to balance their personal feelings with their professional responsibilities, and that wasn't always easy. The pressure of leading such a large company weighed heavily on Richard, and while Samantha understood that, it sometimes felt like a wall she couldn't break through. One evening, as they sat together in the office, Richard seemed distant, his brow furrowed as he looked over a stack of documents. Samantha watched him, her thoughts racing. Was he pulling away again? She had been so careful, so cautious, but now it felt like something was slipping through her fingers. Finally, unable to stay silent any longer, she spoke. "Richard," she began softly, "what's going on? You've been quiet lately." Richard looked up at her, his gaze tired but sincere. "I'm sorry, Samantha," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've been distracted. The company needs more of my attention right now, and I've been so caught up in it all. I didn't want to make you feel like I was pulling away, but I know I've been distant." Samantha's heart sank, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. "I understand," she said gently, though the words felt harder to say than she expected. "You have a lot on your plate, but just know that I'm here for you. I'm not going anywhere." Richard smiled, a small, grateful smile that made her heart flutter. "I don't want to lose what we have, Samantha. I've never been more certain about anything. But sometimes, I get caught up in everything else, and it makes me second-guess myself." Samantha reached across the desk, her hand brushing his. "You don't have to do this alone," she said, her voice steady but full of warmth. We'll figure this out together. We've already come this far. Richard squeezed her hand, his gaze softening. You're right, he said quietly. Together. And just like that, the weight lifted. They had both been holding back, not sure how to navigate this new phase of their relationship. But now, they knew they didn't have to face it alone. They could face it together. As they left the office that night, walking side by side through the quiet streets, the city lights glowing softly around them, Samantha felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. This was just the beginning. They had worked hard to get here, to build something strong, and they were ready to keep building. Together.